Hello, my loves. Today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories, and if you've enjoyed a Reddit story, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? Maybe that's the notification bell too, and let's start with today's story. Story 1: A run-of-the-mill horror story. Lester and his wife of 10 years, Emily, recently moved into a very large Victorian house in rural Maine. Their marriage had been ripped to shreds by the death of their 5-year-old son, and while they loved each other, they had not been coping well. Lester developed an anger problem, while Emily drank a bottle of wine every night. Seemingly everything reminded them of their late son, and Emily had bad dreams every night about the moment she saw her boy being hit by a pickup truck driven by a bigoted man in his 40s. One night, Lester found himself unable to sleep, and wound up sitting on the edge of his bed staring into the wall as if something was about to crawl out of it. Emily could not sleep either, but she remained lying on her side with her eyes half open. "Lester, what are you doing? It's 2 a.m. Lester groaned and lit up a cigarette. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what went wrong with our Toby. I couldn't run fast enough, despite going on 4-mile runs every morning." Emily sat up and stared at her husband. "Why are you smoking?" "Because I have writer's block," Lester barked. "I am a somewhat recognizable novelist who publishes a whole book every 7 years, but these days, I can hardly string together a few sentences. Trust me, I know all about disappointment. As a stay-at-home painter, I sell 1 piece a month, and I have depression. Still, we can afford this beautiful home." So why their conversation was promptly cut off by a loud thud coming from the hallway. They looked up in silence before another thud rang out. Lester put on his slippers and bolted towards the door. "What are you doing?" asked Emily. "What do you think?" "I'm going to go see what that sound was." He almost went to the closet for his gun, but then he realized that a weapon would not be conceivably useful in that sort of situation. He figured that if there was something out there, he could yell loud enough for it to run away. So, he simply cleared his mind and exited the room. Lester stepped carefully down the hallway before noticing that a door to his right was open. He knew he closed that door before going to bed, so he thought this was strange. Still, without a second thought, he entered the room and closed the door behind him. The room was pitch black, but he did not think to turn on the lights. Instead, he retrieved a cigarette lighter from the pocket of his sweatpants and flicked it on. From the other end of the room, he heard a faint growling sound. He thought that it must be a dog that the previous homeowners left behind, so he approached it without hesitation. With each step, the growling got louder and louder, but this did not deter him. He thought this dog must have been starving, so he bravely pushed on. When he got closer, lightning flashed and he could not believe what was illuminated. It was not a dog at all, but rather, an alien. He realized that this made a lot of sense in that it did not really need to make sense. It was an alien, so that was all he needed to know. The alien reached out, and both of them disappeared. The next morning, Emily decided to move back to New York City. She did not attempt to sell the house nor pack any of her things. She just got in her modest sedan and drove away, crying as the trees passed by. Story 2: A short Jurassic Park horror story. I couldn't believe I had gotten a call after I had already settled down for the night. I drove my work-issued Jeep through the jungle maintenance roads of the park. Heavy rain was pouring down on my windshield, large trees towering over me on either side, as darkness enveloped the road. The only light helping me see ahead was the high beams on the top of the Jeep. I had heard over the radio that the forecast report for tonight and the rest of tomorrow was nothing but rain. I couldn't help but audibly groan and roll my eyes thinking about the weather. At least I'd be inside. But still, my conscience wanted to complain that I had to fix a snap in the line powering the west side of the island. Although, my brain quickly justified it, reminding me that I would be getting a bonus for doing this, or so I was told. The Jeep's engine groaned as I slowly drove it up the hill towards the geothermal plant. I parked it just a few feet away from a side door to the large concrete building. I noted that it was covered with a network of steel red pipes that wrapped around the structure and extended over the top of the roof. I clumsily threw on my windbreaker and stepped out of the vehicle. The rain was pouring down so fiercely it blew sideways. I shielded my face from the wet droplets that were raining down like someone spraying me with a garden hose. I hastily made my way to the back of the vehicle, squinting the entire time. I looked around for my VHS camera, flashlight, and tool belt, which was quite a tremendous task considering it felt like I was effectively being waterboarded and could barely see. I turned to the direction I believed to be the building and made a beeline for the door, the gravel crunching underfoot. Approaching the door, I swiftly inserted my key, turned the doorknob, and slipped inside. Despite the damp and cold interior of the building, I was grateful to have a barrier between me and that horrendous weather. I shut the door with a loud thud, turning around to lean against it before letting out a sigh of relief. I pulled off my once dry windbreaker, tossing it onto a wooden crate beside me. Using my shirt to wipe my wet face, I retrieved my work belt and fastened it around the loops of my pants, securing it in the middle. With a click, I turned on my flashlight and scanned the room. This room served as a side office, connecting to the other rooms on the first floor and acting as the only entry point after work hours. Additionally, it had a staircase leading to the service tunnels below. I aimed the flashlight to locate the record button on my camcorder. Finding it quickly, I pressed it with a click. The tape began to hum, and I couldn't help but wonder why we needed to bring camcorders after hours. I assumed it was some safety protocol, so I brushed off the thought. After all, I was just a maintenance engineer responsible for making sure the plant supplied power to the animals' enclosures, and also would soon cater to the wealthy visitors who would flock to see these animals when the park opened. So with that in mind, I cautiously descended the stairs and entered the heart of the machine. After reaching the bottom of the stairs, I walked for a little bit before slowly approaching an intersection of linking hallways. I proceeded towards the generator room, assuming that starting at the source and then following the designated power line that supplies the west side of the island was the best approach to find where the line had snapped. I found myself in the generator room, where the low humming of the machine bounced off the walls, creating a strange reverberating sound. I directed my flashlight towards the generator, locating the designated line in question, and started following it. I began hoping for the best-case scenario, where it might have just been slightly frayed from something accidentally damaging it. The worst-case scenario would be severe damage caused by who knows what. This situation raises the question of what could have caused this issue. It couldn't have been an electrical overload, as there are specific runoff lines designated to handle large build-ups of electricity, which should charge the emergency power generators all across the park. So, the possibilities are either sabotage by someone within the park or something that entered the plant and caused the damage. I rounded the corner to the left hallway, and after walking for a short minute, I found where the wire had been damaged. Looking at the line, one of my suspicions was correct. This wire looked mangled, torn apart by what appeared to be claw marks. Not from a large animal, but from something slightly smaller. This wasn't gonna be a quick fix. I grabbed the necessary tools and began fixing the line, slowly and meticulously piecing it back together. I was about 20 minutes into the fix when I started to wish I had brought my Walkman. I could be listening to some tunes right now, but instead I'm stuck listening to the faint hum of the generator and the hoots of some animal. Wait a minute. Why am I hearing an animal down here? It was hard to tell where the sound was coming from. It almost sounded like an owl. But that couldn't be right. Of all the indigenous life on the island, there weren't any owls. Only birds that thrived in tropical conditions. The hoots grew louder, and I knew the source was getting closer. Panic set in, and I began to worry that it might be an escaped dinosaur. I scrambled to find somewhere to hide. I shined my light over a small grate in the wall. Perfect. A vent large enough to hide inside. I slowly pried the grate open, carefully placed it to the side, and slid inside the vent, followed by carefully dragging the grate back into its original spot. I quickly turned off my flashlight and stayed absolutely still, trying to make as little sound and movement as possible. The hoots sounded ever so near as a faint new sound could be heard, the clicking of feet on concrete. I peered out through the slits between the grate and saw two scaly legs in the darkness. The legs were accompanied by muscular thighs attached to a fairly large body. It was hard to make out what the creature was, but it was tall, standing around at least 17 feet and measuring around 15 feet in length. The creature raised its head and let out a hoot, the sound echoing eerily in the confined space. It was then that I noticed two protruding crests running along the top of its head from the snout all the way to the back. I remembered this dinosaur from the tour, although this one seemed bigger than the ones we had seen earlier. A small carnivore no bigger than maybe 5 feet at most, but this one dwarfed them in comparison. Could this be how big they really get? We were told that these are ambush predators and they don't actively hunt prey. So it made me wonder if this creature was the reason the power line was mangled. I had too many questions and not enough options to help me get out of this situation. Perhaps if I could just get to my jeep I could radio the nearest ranger station and call in a team to tranquilize the animal. As I contemplated my escape plan, I accidentally shuffled in the tight space, creating a noise that reverberated loudly through the ventilation shaft. The animal snorted, and its head snapped in the direction of the grate. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly that it felt almost audible. I struggled to calm down. But that was proven rather difficult with a ferocious creature mere inches away from me. The animal's head slowly lowered level to the grate peering in. Its amber-colored eyes felt sharp. The darkness provided some cover, making me think that it couldn't see me if I didn't move, just like how the T-Rex's eyesight worked. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief as the animal eventually got bored and turned its attention back to something else. Once this is all over I am sleeping like a log, I thought to myself, though I knew my next shift was looming. However, lost in my thoughts about the end of this ordeal, I didn't notice the faint, strange green light I was basking in. I peered out through the grate to my sheer horror as the creature was now covered in green light, with stripes of green stretching from the back of its eye all the way to the end of the tail. There was even a red stripe running down its spine. I remembered learning about this process in high school. Certain animals had developed adaptability to darker conditions by producing bioluminescent light from their bodies. But the scientists in the lab had assured us during the tour that all the dinosaurs that are bred in the lab are as close to their prehistoric predecessors as possible, unless they were lying, and this is some kind of secret genetic experiment. The animal suddenly caught a whiff of something in the air, and it snarled before ruthlessly leaping forward in a single fluid motion, crunching something in its jaws. Whatever it had eaten squealed, and I could hear the bones snap and buckle under the weight of the beast's jaws. It swallowed its meal, hooted once more, and then ran off in the direction of the intersecting hallways. This creature appeared unusually aggressive, perhaps due to its bioluminescence. The best bet was to keep my guard up and carefully navigate my way out of the plant and back to my jeep. If I encounter that thing again, I highly doubt I'm going to have such a lucky fate. With caution, I opened the grate and crawled out into the hallway. I couldn't risk using my flashlight and revealing my position, so I had to rely on the faint lights above me and using the pipes beside me as a reference guide. Slowly and quietly, I retraced my steps through the intersecting hallways, climbing the stairs with every step carefully cushioned. As I neared the door I had entered through, I began to consider the likelihood of the creature escaping and potentially disrupting the ecosystem in the park. My hand hesitated over the doorknob. I realized that I had to lock this creature inside and find a way to contact the ranger station from within the plant. Then it struck me, the plant's main control office had a direct phone line to the engine facility on the northwest side of the island. If I could make that call, they could send in a team to neutralize the dinosaur. I turned around, facing the daunting staircase that seemingly led to nowhere, and in one final decision, I began my descent downwards once more. I reached the intersection and continued straight to the generator room. Upon entering the room, the air was filled with the sounds of a low hum, providing some cover for my actions. However, I wasn't taking any chances. I circled around the large industrial generator to the other side of the room. There, I spotted a small room built into the wall a few feet off the ground with a ballistic glass window. This room housed the main control unit, which powered the generator and most of the plant. It was also where I expected to find the emergency helpline. I ascended a couple of stairs to reach a metal door situated to the side. I swiped my key card and the metal door slid open smoothly. Stepping inside, I swiped my card once more to secure the door behind me. Making my way over to the control unit, I located a flashing button and pressed it. In response, a deep alarm blared once and the door beside me locked, along with most of the main doors to the plant. At this point, that thing was effectively locked in here with me, or so I hoped. I turned away from the unit, facing away from the window, and walked over to a red phone hanging on the wall. I picked it up and dialed the number. The phone began to ring. As each passing ringtone entered my ear, anxiety welled up inside me. I heard a click and a man with a faint accent spoke through the line. "Engine here. What seems to be the problem? I need assistance at the geothermal plant. There's a dinosaur that has made its way inside, and it's extremely aggressive. I trapped it inside the plant with me." I spoke as calmly as I could. "Understood, I'm dispatching a couple rangers." "Were you able to identify it?" the man asked. "Sorry, I'm not good at identifying dinosaurs." I replied, "Copy that. Listen to me very carefully, find an exit and carefully make your way there. Wait outside till the rangers can reach your current position." "Do you understand?" the man spoke firmly. "Yes, understood, but there's something strange about this one. It's similar to one of the dinosaurs on the tour, but it's much bigger and it has bioluminescent scales that make it glow." As I was explaining, I noticed a faint, familiar green light basking me. My heart dropped as I slowly turned around to see the same dinosaur from earlier, staring at me from behind the window. This time, it could definitely see me, with that sharp amber-colored eye fixed on mine. It felt like it was peering into my soul. The dinosaur snarled, its lip curling, and it took a step back. "Sorry, you said something about it having bioluminescence? Hello?" the man continued to ask. The phone slipped out of my hand and dangled by the cord. I felt my body trembling in fear, but tried to assure myself that the ballistic glass was impenetrable, not even a slug round from a shotgun could breach it. However, my assurance quickly crumbled when the animal rammed its massive body against the glass, causing a crack to form. I backed up against the wall. "Hello, are you there? What was that noise?" the man beckoned through the phone. I picked up the phone and began screaming frantically, "You have to come quickly. It found me, and it's trying to break the glass." The animal repeatedly backed up and slammed its body against the window, weakening its integrity. A few more attempts and it would be able to reach me inside. "The rangers are coming fast, please just hold out for a little longer," the man attempted to assure me. All sense of security was lost when the dinosaur backed up further and, in one final motion, rammed the glass, causing it to shatter on the floor. The dinosaur hissed as it tried to reach me, snapping its jaws. The window inhibited it from coming in any further, as it was too small for the creature to fit through. It stepped back, staring at me. Suddenly, it cocked its head back, and I was flashed by something bright red. I shielded my eyes. When my eyes finally adjusted, I looked back to see two bioluminescent frills sticking out of its neck just behind its head. They rattled like snakes, and the dinosaur began to hiss. It opened its mouth, and I covered my face again. All of a sudden I felt something warm and sticky hit my chest. I looked down to see faintly green, glowing saliva dripping from it. The fumes from the spit made my eyes water as it smelt like rotten flesh. "Ada for the rangers is about 8 minutes from now, till then you're on your own," the man said. I hung up the phone and carefully made my way to the corner of the room, keeping my eye on the dinosaur the entire time. I didn't see where I was going when I accidentally bumped into something. I turned around to see a locker. I quickly opened it and, to my surprise, found a prodding stick in there. I grabbed it and turned it on, the low hum of the electricity sparking between the two copper prongs. I turned around towards the creature once again, and it started hissing once more. I decided to take my chances and charged forward, driving the prodding stick into its mouth and pressing the button. It crackled, causing the dinosaur to jolt and rear its head while screeching loudly, before it backed up and ran off. I seized the opportunity and hopped over the ledge, with pieces of glass digging into my palm, but that was the least of my worries. I rushed out of the room and through the hallway, passing by the intersection and up the stairs. However, my heart sank when I reached the top and found a security blast door blocking my exit. I tried lifting it, but it wouldn't budge. I couldn't afford any roadblocks at this moment. I needed to get out of here now. But then, I recall the window in the main lobby of the plant. I quickly turned around and sprinted down a hallway to find myself in the lobby. I opened the door and stepped inside. Across the room, I spotted the window just above the main door. I pushed a desk in front of it and climbed on top. After unlatching the window, I pushed it open and saw the night sky. To my surprise, the storm had passed, and even better, I noticed headlights at the bottom of the hill. I yelled and waved my arms, hoping they would see me. My heart swelled with relief as I had finally escaped this relentless situation. However, my elation was short-lived, as a chilling breeze, reeking of death, brushed the nape of my neck, freezing me in terror. I turned around once more, only to meet the gaze of the relentless dinosaur that had been tormenting me. Its face was level with mine, and as it cocked its head back, I braced myself for what I thought was its dreaded spitting attack. However, something far more sinister occurred. A sensation akin to daggers pierced either side of my head. To my horror, I realized that my head was now trapped between the jaws of this monstrous beast. With a swift motion, the dinosaur swung its head, sending me hurtling through the air. The gruesome sounds of flesh being torn from my face filled my ears as I crashed into an unknown object. The impact struck my spine, rendering my legs entirely numb and paralyzed. Desperation coursed through me as I attempted to crawl, but a searing pain slashed across my back like a sharp knife. In unbearable agony, I cried out, lying on my back, helpless. When I mustered the strength to look up, I found those malevolent eyes fixated on me. The dinosaur flared its frills and unleashed another torrent of spit, this time landing directly on my face. The burning sensation in my eyes far surpassed any discomfort I had felt earlier. It was as if someone had poured acid on them. I writhed in excruciating pain, screaming in torment. When I opened my eyes, everything was a hazy blur. I realized that I was now blind. The jaws of the dinosaur once again encircled my head, and there was nothing I could do. The grim reality of my impending doom loomed over me. In my final moments, I recollected my earlier thoughts about the sleep I had hoped to enjoy when this whole ordeal was over. It seemed that I would be indeed getting that rest. I closed my eyes as the crushing weight of the creature's jaws sealed my fate. Story 3: Barn Loft. I stopped counting the days after I got around 15. I would have kept going, but I couldn't. I had lost all hope. We stopped wondering if jumping down to escape was an option after watching two boys try to make a break for it. They injured their legs so bad, they couldn't get up, and we watched him drag them away from our sight. We didn't see them again. One by one, the companions I had made came and went, until some of them stopped coming back to the loft altogether. They had been there longer than me, but I knew my time to go where they went was coming soon. Whenever I heard his ladder clang against the loft, I panicked, only remembering to breathe when I wasn't next. Normally when the ones who were taken came back, they never said anything more than a few mutters about experiments. They stayed like that, unmoving, barely talking, until they were taken down again. One girl was able to tell a bit more about what had happened. He would take them into a room that looked almost like one at a hospital, strap them down onto a table, and put an IV into their veins, which coursed an unknown substance into them. He said it would change them. There was more she wasn't telling us, and I couldn't tell if she'd stopped talking because she couldn't remember or just didn't want to relive it. We never knew his motive until it was evident that a couple who had come back had noticeably changed. The look in their eyes was wilder, they moved in awkward, jerky movements, they weren't human anymore. The rest of us stayed far away from them for as long as we could, unsure of the better option, becoming them or disappearing forever. We didn't have a choice, but the thought of one or the other was almost as terrifying as our situation. It wasn't hard to pick up on his schedule. He might have been mad, but he was methodical. The plan was to wait for him to leave with his tray of tools, none of which I recognized. He always took a long time to clean them. We didn't know exactly where that was, only that it was outside the barn. I didn't know whether to be anxious or flattered that he took the time to clean them up before using them on his next experiment. After he had left with the tray, we were to crawl out the hole in the wall where multiple kids had unknowingly teamed up to tear away at the old boards of the wall when he wasn't there. It wasn't very noticeable on the inside, because we'd just put the boards in front of the hole and hide it. Even though he kept us in a loft, making it so we couldn't jump down on the inside, the outside proved to be easier. Through the hole, we were able to see a small roof right there that we would be able to get on to use to get onto the ground. I wasn't as optimistic as everyone else. I had almost started to look forward to my turn with him and wanted to know what would happen. I was still terrified of him, though. I saw what the stuff did in the IV did to the others before they were killed or turned into a mutant. It wasn't something to look forward to, but what else was I supposed to hope for when escape hadn't been an option? When the time came to execute our plan, I may have actually felt a twinge of optimism, though I found myself saying it wasn't going to work. But, after all that time of being here, watching everyone around me disappear, maybe I was finally getting out. We uncovered the hole and the first person went through. Everything was going as well as it could. Until that first person on the outside fell through the roof we were supposed to get on. In a panic, someone else went out, too, maybe to see if it was possible to avoid falling through as well. They didn't and managed to lower themselves enough to safely jump onto the ground. This gave the rest of us hope. However, the crash of someone falling through the roof had not gone unnoticed. He was back inside now, yelling. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I didn't need to. I was buzzing with so many thoughts and feelings, my blood turned cold as I realized this may not work. The sound of his footsteps urged us to get on with the next kid's escape. The clang of his ladder caused us to scramble to get through the hole before he could make it up there. I got through and saw the opening in the roof that had been left from the first escapee. It was barely avoidable, but the ones who went out before me had went around it and made it to the ground. I could, too. All I had to do was lower myself onto the ground. Even though they could have already run off, the ones who had made it out first waited, arms open, ready to catch me. It all happened so fast. I was pushed before I could figure out how to get down fast enough without hurting myself. I fell onto the people below me and someone else fell on top of me. It just had to be one of the mutants who had pushed me, now crushing me between them and the people underneath me. We were disoriented, the sunlight was blinding, and the sounds of nature suddenly around us overwhelming. Our limbs were a tangled mess. I couldn't tell my arms and legs from the people I landed on or the mutant kid weighing down on me. I heard words of praise and the mutant's weight lifted from my body. I thought we were free until I saw him. He caught us before anyone could make a move to get up. Story 4, Beginning of the End Horror Story. My name is Jonas, and this is the story of how I survived the Great War of the 21st year. This is the story of my scars from the front lines. Born in the year 99, I was born under the name Josiah M. Springfield. My mother worked as a carpenter, and my father, well, I didn't see him much, but I heard strange stories about his adventures. Some said he was a pirate working off the coast of Florida. Others said he was a document repairman in a place called a material yard working on some secret project. Many people found and entered his garage, however, anyone who entered never came out again. I myself worked in a few different places where I was able to find work, because the war was going on. Jobs were very scarce, as were fuel and other necessities. Luckily I didn't drive and I run everywhere or ride my bike, which means I'm often bullied by people for not knowing how to drive, but this means that if I need to, I can run about 5 miles without getting tired because I'm not lazy and I'm extremely active. However, because of my strength, I was often beaten a lot, with them saying run faster than this girl, and sometimes they still do that because I'm weak. Like a cruel game, they signed me up for the 8th year of bombing, because they know the physical wound will heal, but the wound never leaves you. You will never forget the pain horror of war. But it was my sense of rightness that kept me going, and my epiphany. That would be the key to keeping me alive, amid the most hysteria since the early two-wave years. Everything went well until one day, while eating breakfast, I received a letter and was assigned to the 580th Italian Air Force under the sole command of Lieutenant Leaf. The war against the so-called furries was going terribly wrong, with bombing raids taking place in the skies every night over the small town of Handleton, with a population estimated to be the size of an average football stadium. They liked to tokenize people. They used history as inspiration for their intimidation, mainly with documentaries about World War II. Using blueprints, they recreated old fighters with improvements they made perfect. Despite being intelligent furry people, they are easily distracted by something shiny. This was their main method against them until they created an injection that could transcend all dimensions, and all the ability to create them is distracted. I was assigned to a bomber crew of 25 people, and the plane was called Lucky 13. I was given badges and ordered to bomb 2 major cities with the crew, 2 cities which are called Owatan and Fur City. 2 hours passed and we were flying over the city of Owatan. The first commander in the drive shouted at us, "That's right, you worm. I want to see these bombs fall on this city so much that it hurts. I don't want to see a single inch of it left. Give these furries their own damn medicine." What do you say? Everyone responded with a quick "Gura." As soon as the bombs began falling silently to the people and the giggles of the monstrous crew members were heard, the whirlwind of chaos broke out. Although on the bomber it was all so easy to find one by one running to safety, even though it was almost architectural, when a nest was found and then, again, heard that cry and then said, Commander Look came back at us with unbelievable beaked faces, shouting at us I'd fly down there and finish the job. You good-for-nothings, get down there and finish them off. And if I hear one of you, if that hairy bastard is saved, I will send the machine to an honorable military court. One by one, the men jumped out of the plane in perfect synchronization, chanting military tunes to stimulate themselves, until there was only one left. Me, and then there was the unmistakable sound of 300 caliber bullets stretching out the sides and the engine of Lucky 13, and it was now or never. I had to jump or I would die. I would know error. I prayed to God above and jumped out the back, and everything slowed down and started to almost stop. Is this where I die? I heard the noise of the terrifying Hyena Mk2 coming in above me. The propeller almost grazed my head, or 5 meters not far behind the Hyena was the famous Wasp Mk3. Both of these aircraft were 2 of the most fearsome aircraft models ever built by the Ardvakian military. Not far behind is the heavy cruiser Sea Serpent, weighing about 100 years, the most powerful and powerful. As pure as one can make by hand. As I continued to fall, watching my life flash before my eyes and the wind rustling my hair and passing through my ears, I heard a faint, yet distinct call, "He once." Again I heard what sounded like a woman's voice. "Hey you idiot, you will destroy the cement. Hey! What the hell, get them out." I woke up to find myself less than 200 meters above the ground and continuously rushing towards the ground, and I pulled my parachute at just the right moment. Fear and anxiety paralyzed me as I pulled it. My knees, I comforted the house with a tremendous force, and I heard a tremendous pull and a sharp pain in both knees. The parachute pulled me through the roof. The pain was unimaginable. Finally, I slid down the house and hit the ground. I hit my head on the flower pot and felt myself being pulled inside. As I felt myself being pulled into this stranger's house, I could feel them struggling with the weight of my still body being pulled through the door, the occasional light coming on underneath. My closed eyes, blinking at an uneven pace, I placed on a certain bed. There was a strong smell, something I had never smelled before. I almost thought I had dipped my head in skunk urine mixed with pig manure. I inhibited waking up and screaming. The scream was delayed from where I was fallen to my fate. My heart was faster than ever. My anxiety was at its peak. I finally woke up and I couldn't see anything. There was an incomprehensible darkness that covered my face even though it was drawn to the darkness like a moth to a lamp. I woke up, screaming with such excitement that my vocal cords felt like they might melt. The lights flashed from the intensity, and then the unintelligible sound of a door was smashed open, not echoing throughout the room with such intensity. I had never experienced this before. Finally, after what seemed like years of deep sleep, I heard a distant, barely audible voice. "Is that you? Or not?" He didn't expect that he would wake up so early. Let me postpone the search plan. My cell door opened. It took a long time for the light to penetrate every corner of the room. It was as if the room itself was bathed in light, absorbing every particle of light into the cushioned walls, like a chocolate connoisseur enjoying every moment of it. I wished I never woke up when I saw the state of the room. Every square foot of the room was covered in blood, organs, and feces, and I realized what that smell was when I first arrived, when light finally flooded into the padded psychiatric hospital-style cell, and when my eyes finally adjusted, I saw a woman, though she wasn't quite a woman. I can't determine the type. Story 5, Broken Lights, a short horror story. Her breathing was wheezed. Her pacing was quick, and her focus was everywhere. Sasha's adrenaline was spiking her heart and movements in a way that shouldn't be possible. Her energy was almost endless because of it. The screams of the hostile beings running after her were loud, ear-splitting even, sounds that would render someone's throat raw if attempted to replicate. Their footsteps matched her pace, if not quicker. Feet sprinting in the grass that shuffled from theirs and her own movements. The grass surface turned to cement. Her shoes clunked against the hard surface as she ran for her life. Dodging towering metal crates and screeching monsters, her way was blocked by a looming metal warehouse. Seeing no other option, she kept her pace up for its wide-open door. Hearing one of the creatures behind her grow ever so closer, feet getting faster and louder, breathing more quickly and heavier down her neck, she dove for it. The moonlight was masked by pure darkness, her body toppling to the cement ground of indoors, her flashlight shattering on the ground. Turning to look at the open door, she threw herself up. It screamed before she threw the door closed, turning the lock. Her breathing wheezed, shuddered as she slouched forward against it, resting her forehead against the door's surface. Her breathing was so strained it was difficult to pin it between her lungs begging for air or emotions taking over, and she was on the verge of crying. Either way, she was struggling. Her legs shook in weakness, the adrenaline fading and almost begging for her to collapse. She kept herself standing, however. Looking over her shoulder, she only just now realized that the building was completely pitch black. Her mind was too originally focused on escaping with her life still intact. Diving to her knees for the flickering flashlight on the ground, she picked it up. No. No, 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 no. The glass was shattered, the light bulb inside flickering in an attempt to stay alive. She smacked its surface onto the palm of her hand in aggressive attempts. That only seemed to make it worse. With one more firm pound of it against the palm of her hand, it died. The light dimmed before the entire building shrouded her in complete darkness. Her breathing shuddered. She was completely defenseless against the Weavers. The Weavers. Human hybrid creatures of complete hostility. Broad-shouldered human beings who have succumbed to their form. Clothes ripped and tattered to almost nothing but rags. Skin a sickly pale, black bags under their glowing orange hungry eyes like goggles, hands and feet completely black like they were burned, nails so long that they could reach their knees without even bending over, ears sharp and pointed, and jaws split into arthropod-like mandibles, salivating, clicking and screeching in communication. Their motivation is unknown, and so is their origin, for what she knew. But the way they treat humans is cemented and true. Angry, hostile, and deadly. Some kill on the spot, others drag them away, never to be seen again. She was pursued by 3 of them in that chase. From the glance she got over her shoulder, 2 were male, and the other was female, easily distinguishable by their appearance and host. The people at the safe house told her it was a bad idea to go out by herself. "Sasha, you'll get yourself killed." She took it anyway. Sasha lifted her head, staring into the empty black void of the warehouse before her. Adjusting her black long hair, she reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. She opened up the camera and pointed her phone to the darkness before her. With a press of her thumb, the camera flashed. With the camera flash, the terrain was revealed to her for only a second. Towering metal shelving units with wooden crates. She hated that she could only see for a split second. She hated the dark. She doesn't fear it itself. She fears what might be hiding inside it. She fears that something would just jump out at her the moment she presses that camera button. Despite the fear growing inside of her, she pressed on. She slowly stepped further into the darkness to accomplish her quest that she started the moment she stepped out of the safe house. To find her 2 missing kids. It has been hours since she has last seen them, since this whole problem began. A part of Sasha wanted to look for a light switch, but in reality, that would be fruitless. The town is devoid of any power. The power plant was ambushed by the Weavers, the phone tower was attacked and the radio tower's cords were cut. The town is stuck in a blackout. No lights, no power, no communication to the outside world. They were isolated, and the world was completely ignorant of what this town is currently going through. Pressing the camera button on her phone again, it flashed, exposing her path for another second. She was slowly treading down a narrow hallway of towering metal shelving units. But in the end, it was hard to tell where she was going since all she could see was just a wall of darkness in her path. She pressed it again, and her heart stopped for a second. Laying on the cement ground before her in that second-long flash was a pink ribbon. She dove to her knees, shock overcoming her as she gently scooped up the pink, glistening ribbon. Her breathing shook as did her arms as she lifted the light little ribbon in her hands. Her daughter's ribbon. A ribbon fixed into a bow in the back of her head to make her hair ponytail, and here it was, laying on the ground and now clutched in her mother's hands. Lifting her head, looking forward, her heart stopped again. A shoe. A blue sneaker. Her son's sneaker. Sasha felt like she could cry. She buried her face into her daughter's ribbon, weeping for them. She could just imagine the situation they were in. Her daughter holding her brother's hand, leading him away, running, screaming, their young child's shrieks echoing in the warehouse before being caught by these monsters. She expected the worst to happen to them, and the thought would not go away. It brought tears to her eyes, water falling down her face as she sobbed into the tattered pink bow in her hands. A small part of her had a glimmer of hope. Maybe they were dropped in their escape. Maybe her bow wasn't fixed tightly to her head and unraveled off. Maybe her son's shoe slipped off during the run to safety. A choked breath jumped out of her as she lifted her head from the ribbon. Okay, she regained what little composure was left. Stay focused. With the mindset that they have escaped, she pressed on. She shambled through the darkness, occasionally pressing the camera on her phone to illuminate her way for a second. She stepped into a small opening, or at least it felt like she did. The thick air suddenly got thinner and it felt more open. Sasha shuffled forward through the dark, treading through a blanket of nothing. Her foot slipped on something wet. Her leg was thrown forward. Sasha gasped, toppling backwards. She crashed to the cement floor, the breath being knocked out of her. A groan growled from her throat as she sat up. She stared ahead to make out anything that she stepped on, but it was near impossible. Sitting up and shuffling to her knees, she lifted her phone to the floor, pointing the camera at it. With the press of a button, the camera flashed. Sasha's blood ran cold. Gore. Remnants of something tainted the floor before her. A pile of mutilated flesh, bone, and blood, rendering its shape completely unknown. Sasha flashed the light again. As if the first glance wasn't already sickening enough, the second one bore more answers. There were no traces of clothing in the fleshy mess. Instead, remnants of torn and ripped fur, which could mean it was an animal. An animal, sure, but as for what kind was completely beyond her. It was too messy, mangled, and bloody to tell. Movement caught her attention in front of her. Sasha's breathing spiked as she lifted her chin. For the time she has been in the dark warehouse, her eyes seemed to have adjusted ever so slightly. In her vision, she could make out two shelving units side by side. One of them shook. Sasha's breathing shuddered as she stood up. She stared at the wall of darkness in front of her. A low, gurgling, croaking noise filled the dead silence in the warehouse. Sasha slowly lifted her phone, pointing it at the darkness before her. Her arm shuddered as she did. A whimper came out of her as she bit the bottom of her lip. She pressed the camera button on her phone. The camera flashed. The weaver shrieked. Sasha screamed, the male creature shielding its eyes from the blinding flash of the camera light. Her feet reacted, attempting to back her away from the hostile creature. The humanoid creature strained a scream back, pouncing from its narrow space between shelving units onto her. She was forced to the ground as it straddled on top of her. Sasha struggled as the creature pinned her to the floor. A shriek left its throat and passed the four large mandibles of teeth in its mouth. She threw her arms into directions, but it kept a firm grip on them to keep her still. Its alive eyes narrowed inside the black bags under them as a strained noise left its throat, its salivating tongue flinging out of its mouth for a quick moment. It lurched its head forward. A blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the warehouse from the poor victim as the sharp teeth punctured the flesh of her neck. Story 6. Doctor didn't believe me. After reading several medical horror stories on here, it's no small wonder I hate going for anything medical. I thought I'd like to share my story. My experience is small potatoes compared to the rest, but here goes. Around late March of 2017, my right wrist was feeling particularly sore for several days. I bought a wrist brace and wore it during work, because at the time I had a job that required a lot of heavy lifting, upwards of 60 pounds. I favored my right wrist, overcompensating by using my left arm, hand to bear the brunt of the weight whenever I could. My right wrist eventually healed over the course of a month or so. My self-diagnosis was that it was tendinitis. Unfortunately, the exertion on my left for the prolonged period caused severe tendinitis in my left wrist. In early May, I noticed the first symptoms. Again, I bought a wrist brace and lessened the load. Unlike with my right, my left was not improving. It worsened to the point that I had very limited movement of my wrist. Any accidental pressure or bumping of two of the tendons in my wrist, the ones leading up the thumb, resulted in terrible pain. By mid-July, knowing that my wrist should not still be in so much pain, I finally went to urgent care. The doctor examined my wrist and sent me on my way with a low-grade prescription painkiller. I took most of that medication over the course of the next 2 weeks and it did nothing. Finding that the treatment I was given had been useless, I didn't feel confident seeking further treatment. Even though my wrist was in pain, this was mostly typical if I moved, bent my wrist, or accidentally bumped it. For nearly 3 more months I dealt with it. By October, my wrist had gradually worsened that it was constantly sore, at best, or leaving me in excruciating pain with tears rolling down my face and unable to use my left hand for up to an hour. In fact, my wrist felt as though it had locked up. I could barely flex my wrist at all by this point. I was barely using my left hand at all anyway, just to avoid causing pain. Finally, I booked an appointment with the local poor man's clinic that I was registered at the time. I go in for my appointment, and after 20 minutes of waiting in the exam room, a doctor finally comes in. I explained to her my symptoms and for how long, telling her specifically that I physically cannot flex my wrist beyond a small degree and that attempting to do so causes tremendous pain. I also told her of my failed previous treatment. Her response? "You're just babying it," she says. Then, without hesitation, and as if to prove her point, she grabs my left arm in one hand and my left hand in her other, and rapidly torqued my wrist in a few directions before I yanked my wrist out of her grasp. Cradling my wounded appendage and with tears streaming down my face, she looked at me with an "oh shit" expression and told me very hurriedly that she is going to prescribe to me a muscle relaxer and a stronger pain reliever. I left the clinic and headed to the nearby pharmacy to get my prescriptions. While I'm waiting for them to be filled, still very sore from her manhandling, I kept thinking over what had just happened. Why didn't she believe me at first? Why had she been so aggressive to prove that my symptoms were nothing? Then it occurred to me that she likely suspected me of simply making up my injury in order to score some painkillers. My instant reaction to her examination made her realize very quickly how wrong she was. Over the next few days, I took both medications. Despite the relief from the pain, they left me feeling violently ill. After 4 days, I stopped taking them completely. Yes, I 100% wanted painkillers for my alleged addiction. Surprisingly, this doctor called me 2 days after I had stopped taking the meds to follow up with me. I admitted to her that I had stopped and why. She then prescribed to me an anti-nausea medication and told me to resume the other meds. I did as I was told. The pain subsided, though not completely, and my wrist remained stiff. That is, until nearly 2 weeks later. With the pain no longer at the forefront of my mind, I just happened to flex my wrist a little bit. I felt and heard a loud snap in my wrist. It didn't hurt at all, but there was a definite change for the better. It was as if 60% of the pressure in my wrist was suddenly gone and I had reclaimed some of my flexibility. I felt a great deal of emotional relief. A few days and a second snap later resulted in my complete recovery. Unfortunately, this experience has forever left me distrustful of the US healthcare system. I am wary of the day that I will have to rely on it. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.